Thank you for joining me for yet another packed hour. Later on in the hour, we'll be talking all things tech. And one of the things we'll be discussing is lights around your house. You can have them, apparently, and they'll tell you whether somebody is approaching as a friend or somebody you don't know or a stranger. I mean, it just goes on, doesn't it? All of that and a lot more in our tech roundup. Plus, should cyclists have to have insurance? Recently, there was a case of a drunk cyclist mowing into two women. One woman needed her finger amputated. The judge spared the cyclist jail. But of course, what happens if you've got no insurance or anything? What happens to the poor victims? I mean, if it was a car accident, there would be some payout or what have you. So there are some organisations, mainly driver organisations, that say, you know what, I think cyclists go through traffic lights, they don't heed warnings, what have you. They should have to have insurance or some kind of registration. Cycling groups, however, say no, we're trying to get people out of cars and onto bikes, and something like the added cost of insurance would be prohibitive. I don't know what you think about that. 0344 499 1000. You can either phone that in, you can WhatsApp a message in, or you can leave a voice message on that number. You can text the word talk to 87222 or X at TalkTV. This might be one you want to weigh into. Should parents ever be held responsible for the harmful actions of their children? It's a question I'm about to put to our two legal eagles, either side of the Atlantic, on our You Be the Judge segment. The reason I ask this, and this whole question has come up, this 14-year-old Georgia shooter, Colt Gray, has just appeared in court on murder charges. So has his father. His father was charged in connection with the shooting, including with counts of involuntary manslaughter and second-degree murder. They directly connect with the actions of his son and allowing him to access an AK-47 type weapon. Go figure. It's not the first time it's happened. Back earlier in the year, the parents of Michigan school shooter Ethan Crumley were both sentenced to 10 to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter. That's James and Jennifer Crumley, because of their son's deadly shooting at the Oxford High School in 2021. Things are a bit different in the UK, but we have things like, for instance, completely different. Thank God we don't have the gun issue. But for instance, truancy, a parent is liable for that. So let's start off with the US. This is quite a new thing, Mark, isn't it? Where, in a second case, the parents are being convicted because they either actually bought the gun for their child or in the first case, Mark, the parents, there were all the signs, all the writing on the wall that their son might do something. Let's talk about when, under US law, the parents are responsible for the criminal or, actions of a child, or when a child kills or hurts another.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important in both the cases in Michigan and the Georgia case that it's the parents' own conduct that was at issue. They're not being held what's known as vicariously liable for the acts of their kids. And in both cases, there was activity by the parents involving the purchase of a weapon. In the Georgia case, the father is charged because he purchased an AR-15 after facts were brought to his attention that his son might have posted an internet post threatening to shoot up the school. And then right after he was interviewed by investigators, within a few days, he purchased the AR-15 and gave it as a gift to the son. Now, the charge in Georgia, there's sort of two charges. One is an involuntary manslaughter charge, which is based upon his recklessness or gross negligence in providing the weapon to his kid. There's a second charge. The murder charges, I think, are honestly, a little bit of a stretch, because the district attorney used a concept called felony murder, which says that because apparently the kid came from an abusive relationship with his father, and because of that relationship, the district attorney is alleging that relationship led to the murder charges. So I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but we'll see. In the Michigan case, again, the two parents were convicted of involuntary manslaughter, which is a lesser charge than murder. But that being said, they were still sentenced to 10 to 15 years. And again, in both of those, in that case, there were warning signs that their child was going to threaten to shoot up the school. They purchased a 6-hour handgun, automatic handgun, semi-automatic handgun for their kid. And in fact, their child, they were brought to the school because their kid actually drew a picture of a weapon which resembled the same gun that they had purchased. That so there were a number of mental health issues that were brought to their attention. But that really is one of the first cases that I'm aware of where parents were held, or they weren't held vicariously liable. They were held liable for their own acts. And that was, in fact, the Michigan prosecutor made it clear that she was not trying to establish a prosecution. The last point I'd like to make is that there are 42 states, including activity by Kamala Harris in California, which does hold parents liable for certain acts, like, for example, truancy, those type of conduct. And also, parents can be civilly responsible for activities by their kids. But again, the two cases you mentioned are really the first where felony charges were filed. And Michigan was the first one where there was a felony conviction that I'm aware of.
And I think as well, Mark, it sends a strong message, doesn't it? I mean, it's a whole different way of thinking, which hopefully will make gun owners, but in both cases where a parent actually goes out and buys a minor gun. Let me come to Joseph in the UK. Joseph, let me throw this at you, and it's something that, especially at the end of term parties, many parents, I'm going to stick my neck out, it's not unheard of, many parents will buy their underage kids alcohol to have a party at home. What happens if at that party, and I actually know of one case where something like this happens, the parents supply the alcohol, the kids are all underage, they couldn't have bought the alcohol themselves. At that party, there is a rape, or one kid beats the hell out of the other and ends up in hospital. Anything like that, where something that is criminal, whether you're an adult or a child. Is there any onus, any liability for the parent that supplied that alcohol? And most parents go out, say, I'm going to the movies and what have you, so they're not even there, it could be in their home. Any criminality for the parents at all?
Yes, but not immediate joint responsibility, in short, for the actual offence. So if a fight breaks out and the son or whatever, or the guest who's been given alcohol, who's under 18, for example, or under 16 or whatever, by parents, then commits a grievous bodily harm, a very serious assault, wounding, whatever, on another person at the party. The parents don't become accessories unless they've actively encouraged it or in some way facilitated it in the way that the law allows for people to be prosecuted together if one person's just been there helping. Having said that, giving alcohol to a minor, criminal offence. Now, that's not to say it's a criminal offence that you're likely to go to prison for. I think the maximum is a fine off the top of my head. So, yeah, it's a separate criminal offence, and that's probably the right way. I think that, it's absolutely right what Mark said about those two extreme US cases. That was liability on its own for criminal actions. And I have to say, having read a bit about the case, specifically about, I think her name is it Jennifer Crumley, the mother in one of the cases, yeah. I can't see, I certainly can't see a legal barrier for a UK court to use its equivalent operating against the framework of the similar, not identical legislation that we have for manslaughter, for example. I could see a UK court coming to the same conclusion, or at least I can't see a legal barrier to that case being decided subject to evidence in the same type of way. That was a very, very unusual circumstances. I don't think it's actually that dissimilar of a situation. What does exist, generally speaking, with parenting, we've heard from Mark again, truancy. Yes, in the UK, we have laws that essentially criminalise parents if their children, in reality, are serial truants from school. Things actually go a bit further than that. If a child commits an offence or is at risk of committing an offence, parents can have a civil order imposed upon them, a bit like an ASBO, which is if it's breached, can result in fines in the magistrate's court, where you're basically forced to undertake that you will make sure that your child doesn't commit any offences. And actually, your child doesn't have to already be guilty of an offence for them to apply for this for this order. Merely there being a risk and the youth offending team expressing a concern about it. So I think that probably is rather draconian. And I think that although councils, local authorities try to gloss over it and say, well, actually, I've seen in my research one local authority, which shall remain nameless, fortunately for them, they talk about these parenting orders that are essentially punitive, criminalising parents, as a way of helping parents. Well, you help parents by focusing on the reasons that their children are at risk, and invariably it's poverty, it's other problems like addiction, mental health, all the usual stuff. You address that, and this isn't me being a kind of wishy-washy kind of this is what I'd like to happen because I'm on the left and warm and fuzzy and all that stuff. No, there's data, there are studies. This is criminal evidence that has been in criminological studies over the last 50 years, that the link between poverty and youth offending is absolutely there. And
it's unquestioned. Yeah, absolutely. I want to move on now because this last subject, and whoever wants to start on this one, all of those UK and US court dramas. I mean, my husband absolutely loves like Law and Order and what have you. So let me come back to you, Mark Schnapp. What do they say in those court dramas where you as a US lawyer think, we never say that? You know, like maybe, I don't know, it's the surprise witness that they suddenly pull out of the bag or something like that. I mean, what are some of the things that make you laugh when you hear them in one of these criminal, these courtroom dramas, Mark?
In the show, I'm sorry. I think that the court, I mean, look, in the show Law and Order, which is very popular here, in the course of an hour, there's an investigation, a trial, and a conviction. Court cases don't take an hour. And it's very rare that there would be a surprise witness because, although, and again, that will vary between the federal and state systems. In the state systems, there's much more discovery. In the federal systems, you don't have to disclose as much in advance. So you don't really see the surprise witness come in. Although I had a case where years ago when I was a prosecutor, I was sitting with a federal agent and we had a witness come in and the agent looked up and said, "Hey, that's my cousin." So it was sort of weird, right? But talking about court TV kind of stuff, I mean, I tried one of the first televised trials in the U.S. involving one of the Kennedy family members in a very highly televised media attention rape trial. And what was happening in the courtroom and what was being what the talking heads were saying were two completely different things. It was absurd. But I'm not sure that's the question you asked, but if the question, is there a reality? I mean, look, I love watching Law and Order as much as anybody. That being said, that's probably the closest thing to reality that I've seen. It's a pretty well done show, but things don't take things happen in much greater time periods than 1 hour.
Yeah, as we've seen with all the Trump court cases. What your thoughts, Joseph, when it comes to British TV court dramas? Are there things that are said and done that you sort of roll your eyes at, or are they pretty accurate as well?
I think they try their best, and I've got a vested interest here. I'm actually a legal script consultant for the international British-based television program Silent Witness, which is shown in about 25 countries around the world. And really, the extent to which they really want accuracy really is rather impressive. But as Mark says, it's hard. You want drama, don't you? You want excitement. You don't want it to be like paint drying and on a TV thing, but you get the real life thing where you're going through weeks and weeks and weeks of statements being read out, and then occasionally something interesting might happen. But there are a couple of really great examples. Rumpole, if you remember it, good old Horace Rumpole. Well, that was written by a barrister, John Mortimer, and it was funny, it was accurate, and it was really good drama.
Yeah. What about when somebody suddenly admits their guilt? Does that ever happen halfway through? They suddenly, well, you're a defense lawyer.
I think the whole point. The whole point about these things is they're supposed to take you by surprise. So you probably don't want something when it comes to a plot twist like that that's completely accurate. I mean, that Lincoln Lawyer, the film I'm talking about rather than the TV series, of course, it's all unlikely, but you could see a lot of it, how some of it kind of makes sense. And it's fun. One of the best of all, My Cousin Vinny, starring Joe Pesci. Well, I tell you what, you couldn't have a quirkier, off-the-wall legal type character, but watch those cross-examinations if you're a young law student, because it really gets the construction of how it's done. And I tell you what, I'd bet serious money there was an active criminal lawyer advising on that particular script.
Well, there's no question that lawyers participate in the script decisions. I mean, and again, like I said, the Law and Order show, in my opinion, is probably the best of the shows that I've been watching. So, I mean, it's just but given the compressed time, it's a little tough to dramatize stuff. For example, if there was a massive fraud case that was very complicated, it would be impossible to demonstrate that in an hour show. It just doesn't work that way.
It just goes, and nobody says, okay, I did it. I mean, as you guys are defense lawyers, if you didn't see that coming, I mean, that would be a major fail on your part, wouldn't it? Suddenly they say, okay, Gov, I did it. Thank you both.